Hello everyone, this is Bill Wilcuts with Fort Wayne 912, and this is a video I put together because I wanted everyone to take a look at before our next meeting, our next NICC meeting here in September. Today is Thursday the 12th, and put this video together to kind of save time. There was a lot of information in here. I mentioned this at the last meeting that I had actually had trouble sleeping the night before because just all this stuff came to me, and I wrote it all down, and I finally got it into a presentation to where you can look at it. The idea of putting it on the video and having it available for you is to look at it and watch it before the meeting on Sunday, and then put together any questions, suggestions, criticisms, ideas that that I may have left out. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. Let's just run through it here. Great thing about this is that you can pause the video at any time while you're watching it. Take some notes. What I'd suggest is you get a pen and paper and take notes on anything that comes to mind. Also, there's some things in here that I'll talk about that'll pose some questions for you. Just put some ideas down on that, on each of the questions, and of course jot down any suggestions that you have. There's a lot here, so I'm going to get through it as quickly as I can. Obviously, it's nice to have the video. You can stop it and back it up and watch certain parts again if you miss anything. So this is a proposed structure, or not really structure. We've already really got a structure in place, but this would be an infrastructure for NICC. And this, what it'll do is it'll do a few things. It'll basically systemize what we've been trying to do. It'll enable our member groups to act in unison systematically. It'll put to motion the reason behind NICC's creation, which was for us all to act in unison and become a larger voice, share information, and share the workload of tracking everything that's going on in our government and politics. In other words, the proposed ideas that we have, things will get implemented. In other words, there will be no more of this, somebody's going to have to do whatever it is. The responsibilities are taken on by individuals. It creates a system of communication between the groups and then streamlines activism for our group members. In other words, the individual group membership. Those folks out there that don't have the time to do any of this, they can get an email from us and say, oh, I need to call so-and-so politician because he's supporting the amnesty bill or whatever. And like I said before, it spreads out the workload. A couple things to note that I just want to emphasize is, this presentation and everything, it's all merely suggestions, just some ideas that I had that I'm throwing out there. And as always, any of the activities or involvement, commitments and whatnot, it's all voluntary. The other thing to keep in mind here is that as we would move forward, I would suggest that we make sure that NICC itself does not actually collect email addresses of individual group members, but that if there's something in your area where you're collecting addresses and whatnot, that remains with the individual group. Communication from NICC goes to the group leaders, so that would be all of us who have been attending these quarterly meetings. Now, obviously, you could have us as the individuals that this communication goes through, or you could designate somebody or a couple people in your group to receive these communications and then pass them on to the group members. And I got some charts here that'll kind of lay out the flow of information. Now, some of the suggested positions that I've got here or responsibilities may actually require more than one person to do. It may require a team of individuals. But everything I think you'll see is going to be an aspect in politics or cover multiple aspects of politics to get things done, to keep the conservative movement moving forward. So here we have the existing direction of NICC, and it will remain in place. So So right now we have our Patriot Group leaders, all of us that have been showing up to these quarterly meetings, and then there's going to be the NICC service team. And I'll get into details to what that'll consist of. But basically, the Patriot Group leaders or liaisons, whoever you want to come to the NICC meetings, attend the NICC meetings, those are the NICC leadership individuals. So basically, the NICC service team will lead, but the group leaders are the ones who actually are the leaders, make the decisions, approve things, and so forth, and then the service team would take those directives and make sure they get implemented and put into motion. Now, issue teams execute tasks on the specific issues, and I'll get into that later. But that's basically where we have one group following Agenda 21, and they're going to execute any tasks, track issues, and so forth. I'll get into the details of that. The service team basically would be kind of a centralized facilitator for the communications and actions between all of the Patriot groups. So it kind of makes everything flow, and these people would be dedicated to that task and making sure that if one group calls for something to be done, the information gets out to everybody and so forth, vice versa. Now, communications between NICC and the group members, like I said, that's filtered through your group leadership or a couple people that you design. So if something came from one group about an Agenda 21 issue, it would come from that group to the NICC communications folks, and then it would go out to your leadership. And then your leadership would decide whether or not you wanted to forward that on to your group members. So we never really, NICC service team would never directly contact the Fort Wayne 912's group membership, individual members directly. It would all be filtered through the leadership. And therefore that just decentralizes things and maintains our group autonomy. Now, the flow of information and directing of activism will basically work this way. So you'll have one group here, and let's say it's Fort Wayne 912, and we are the issues team, or we have an issues team, and an issue comes up, and we need to contact politicians. That information is then sent to the NICC service team, and the NICC service team relays it out to the group leadership, and then of course they send it on to their group members if they choose. Basically what I said before. But this really just gives you a physical representation of how that would work. Now, the NICC leadership, like I was talking about, it consists of your chosen representatives, whoever you or your group decides that is. Currently, we have a maximum of 6 reps per group. Just depending over time, depending on how things go, how these go-to-meetings, online meetings go, we might need to reduce that to 3 or 4, and just to kind of keep things from getting too chaotic. We could just set a maximum of 3 or 4 and then just grandfather anybody who's been attending unless the meetings become too chaotic. Now, each Patriot group, the other idea was that each Patriot group needs to establish the following. Now, again, this is just a suggestion, but I really thought publicizing and outreach needs to be is a high priority for each individual group. Now, maybe not so much for some of the smaller areas, but I know in Fort Wayne, the reason this comes to mind is because we have 300,000 people who live in Allen County, and we get about maybe anywhere from 30 to 75 people consistently showing up to our monthly meetings, which is really abhorrent. And then recently we've heard some people looked for a 912 or Tea Party group in Fort Wayne and they couldn't find one, so there's a problem there. But basically publicizing, outreach, getting out to the public, letting them know that there are issues that they need to be aware of, particularly Common Core seems to be a good one, but we've been doing some publicizing things there outside of radio and newspaper and so forth. Another person that I would suggest, and I'll cover all of these in more detail, but a public presenter. somebody who can present information to the public if you invite them in, somebody that can present an issue to them and speak in front of them and answer questions. Now the NICC communications liaisons, this is your group leadership, whoever is going to receive information from NICC, or it'll actually be probably from another group through NICC, but the point here is have 2 or 3 people available that receive that information and can pass it on. The reason for the redundancy is not because of a workload, but simply because if somebody's not around or doesn't get to it and we need people to call by Friday and it's Thursday morning or something, that message needs to get out. Another person that I thought maybe groups could utilize would be what I call bookworms. And I got this idea from the stack of books that I have sitting here that I haven't read yet, and information I'd like to know but don't have time to sit and read. But maybe we could have some folks in our groups or whatever, take on reading a particular book, learn about the issue, and put together maybe information and a presentation on the book, and then that's something we can share together between the different groups. If somebody reads a book like Mark Levin's Liberty Amendment, somebody that reads that book, then we can have a presentation put together and either show it or distribute it to your public presenter, or they could come to your group meeting and do the presentation, whatever it might be. Now, issue team or teams, this would be 8 people. These volunteers would need to be well informed, obviously, on the specific issue. And then I also have a proposed structure for how each team would operate with all of the responsibilities that I laid out there. So here I'll get now. So now I think we'll get into the details next. So your publicizing outreach team would be would consist of a few different things. First thing would be that I think it's critical to have good publicizing system in your local area. This will raise awareness. This would be a systematic way of notifying your media. For instance, if something's going on and you need to get something out there, you have a designated person that contacts specific media outlets every time. So if an issue comes up, hey, we're holding this event on Common Core, this person calls these television stations, these newspaper outlets, and so forth. Now, again, this may be really only relevant in larger urban areas, but something to think about. Promote your presenters and their activities. In other words, if you've got Common Core presentations, which is something we've been doing a lot of here in Fort Wayne, promote that through flyers and postcards and whatnot, whether you hand them out or mail them out. Like I said, contact your local media with PSAs and press releases. Create flyers. This group would create your flyers and your postcards, create your actual materials, designate somebody to do that. Distribute the materials. Some of the ideas that I've had are, local fairs, festivals, parades, concerts, sporting events. Contact event promoters. Gun shows are a great place to find conservatives, I can tell you that. Different trade shows, get some vendor tables there. I don't know if they would allow I think it's called a barker, somebody that would basically stand there on a microphone or with a megaphone and just kind of shout at people as they walk by and things like that. The kind of thing you used to see in some of the older films and stuff. Watch community calendars. Watch your local community calendars. Now in Fort Wayne here, we've got a couple of them. One called Visit Fort Wayne. We've got our public library down here has a community calendar, and that actually broadcasts over the cable system. So we've been putting a lot of things on there as well. And I actually have had some people show up because they saw it on the community calendar. So, public presenters. Now, a public presenter would cover they could be somebody who just covers single issues or multiple issues. Basically, somebody who's not afraid of standing up in front of people and speaking. Another suggestion would be this person would be holding movie nights, which we've been doing here in town, showing Monumental, Runaway Slave, Agenda, Grinding America Down, any of the documentaries that are out there, Windfall. Like I said, hold presentations on specific issues, Common Core, Agenda 21, whatever else is going on, the wind farm stuff. Now, events, these would be events that you would most likely hold in addition to your regular large group meetings. In Fort Wayne, we hold a monthly meeting. These things we've been doing at the library branches in the public library branches, and they have these larger meeting rooms that'll hold, I don't know, anywhere from like around 30 to 40 people relatively comfortably. And then next thing would be the NICC Communications Liaison, which could be, of course, just your group leaders, which many of you already attend the NICC meetings now. And they would receive these communications. Multiple people would be receiving them for redundancy, just in case somebody's out of town or whatever. And they would approve and pass on to each Patriot Group member, so to your Patriot Group mailing list. They would send and forward reminders about events, rallies, and contacting politicians, making sure they do that to each individual member. The bookworms, this would be a volunteer, like I said, chosen to read books. Collusion, Beverly Eekman, she's been doing some writing on the Delphi technique, which is really interesting. This person would create a presentation. They could even do the presentations themselves, or they could share them and deliver to other groups. You have them come in and hold an event, come to your town and do an event for you and present the information, or they could just share it with your group presenter and pass it on, and that person does it. So, and again, this would be something outside of your regular meetings. Doesn't really matter, but I would think it would end up being something done outside of regular meetings. So back to the issues team. Here's the image again of how the information flows, because we're going to get into the issues team. And this will be your source of information for activism. And we'll cover all those aspects and responsibilities. So this is the chart again. Again, it flows from the issues team. They make a call, or you need to know this. People need to know, or people need to call or show up. And it goes through the NICC service team, sent out to the group leaders again, and then down to the group members from the leadership. So the issues team, each Patriot group basically is or has one issues team. The issues team responsibilities consist of a suggested probably bi-weekly in-person or online meeting, just because if you're tracking an issue where there's a lot going on, I mean, that's all up to discretion, depending on what's going on. You may not need to meet very frequently or discuss much very often. Common Core seems to be hopping and bopping a lot, so that's one you'd probably meet or to at least have a discussion weekly. In fact, you might just talk on the phone to specific individuals depending on what's going on that week and who said what and what newspaper posted a high spin article that was just misleading to the public. So they would research the specific issue, become basically experts on it, track the relevant legislation and the media stories behind it, prepare presentations for other groups to inform the local area. So the idea is one group would become an expert on their area, on their topic, and then prepare presentation information, something to be given out to the rest of us, to the rest of the Patriot groups, so that we can present that in our area, not just to our group, but like I said, get out and do the public presentations on Common Core and getting people to come to that, or producing a video that they can watch on the internet and letting them know about that. So the other responsibility would be countering propaganda and the media spin. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but we've seen some articles on Common Core from the Indy Star and the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette that are just absurd and lies and so forth. Organize and prepare the lobbying of politicians. They'll have all the information on what's going on there and how to, what a politician's position is and so forth, and what kind of pressure we need to apply and what we need to call and say or do, show up at their office or something like that. And then, like I said, that basically leads into the next part, which is direct activism to other NICC groups for unified effort, so that we all are sounding out as one large voice, so that if they do something and the next day they get 800, 900 phone calls, would be great. Now, issues team personnel is going to consist of, I think, 8 people or 8 areas of responsibility. Now, I don't know. Depending on the issue, a couple people might be able to do all of this, but here again, the idea is to kind of break things out, spread out the workload so that nobody is really overwhelmed. But, a couple people could possibly do all of these things. But then again, if it's a larger issue and there's a lot going on, it's going to require more help. So you'll have a team coordinator. This person just kind of sets the agenda or gets the agenda and, hey, here's what needs to be done. They're just kind of the organizer. Leads and holds the meetings, either weekly or biweekly. Most likely to be in constant communication with the different volunteers that are working on that project or that topic. Coordinates the action with the team members. The issues team, researchers would be the next part of it, and that is the people, those are the folks that, research a specific issue. They'll cover state and federal levels, activities as far as the legislation goes or that particular topic. They get the facts, they know the details, and they provide the documentation and materials to the lobbying team and anybody else who needs it, really. Any type of reports or documentation, the actual legislation, so that, you have what it is, you have the actual documents, especially if you present anything to a politician and you want them to take your side. Writers. This would be people that would be, they would streamline activism. These folks would draft letters. The idea here is, and this is to help people who work all the time and are really busy, who can't spend a lot of time following this stuff, but if you let them know what's going on, they'll make a phone call, they'll send an email, because it only takes a couple of minutes. We could draft letters and just send them out and say, here's a letter we think you ought to send to your congressman or whatever the case might be, and here's what we think you should tell them, and here's the drafted letter. And of course they can take it and edit it and chop it up and do whatever they want with it, but at least they've got something that they can read through it real quick and go, yep, I like that, and send it on and sign their name to it. Plus some phone scripts if they call. The idea would be to kind of prep the voters to potential arguments and talking points that they get from their politicians. Sometimes you call and they'll actually sit there and argue with you about the issue, or their aides will. And so, if we have some people call and we find out what the aides are saying, what's coming from the senator or the congressman or whoever, and they're arguing with us about the path to citizenship for illegal immigrants, then we can say, no, don't give me that. Just, this is what I want. This is what I know. Don't tell me what to think. Give my message to the congressman. Encountering those talking points, plus the lies and the spin and things and so forth. Collect feedback from the politicians when you call. That would be another important one. And sends information on to the NICC communications coordinator. This is that accessing that network of patriot groups. A trainer basically would develop the presentations on a specific issue, update presentations over time. Now this could be your public presenter as well within your group. Could be the same person. Inform and direct course of action. identify resources and train public presenters in each Patriot group. In person or via GoToMeeting, that could be done. Possibly also be a bookworm, because this person, might read a book and then prepare the presentation, and since they don't mind speaking in public, they could take on that responsibility as well. They could also, since they're training and things like that, also teach some of the Facebook and Twitter tactics that seem to be a critical part of politics now. Legislative trackers. These folks will compile voting records of their politicians. They'll also follow issues, specific legislation, and follow it as it progresses, as it's amended. Now, they would be following this stuff and watching it. This is the nice thing, is once something comes up that really needs attention, they would send it to us. And we're kind of trusting these people in each group to watch what's going on and kind of be a watchdog for us. So if some congressman or some state rep or somebody proposes an amendment that's just outrageous, maybe we need to jump on it, maybe we don't, because if it's really absurd, it probably won't see the light of day. But if it does start to build some steam, then obviously we would want, and it's negative, we would want to be alerted to that and get 800 or 900 phone calls made. So now we have the media watchdog. Media watchdog would be tracking media reporting on a specific issue. So somebody who watches the media on Common Core and then verifies the facts compared to what the article says, and basically points out the lies and the spin, and then somehow we would get that out to everybody. Possibly even do some counter tactics on Twitter and Facebook, because a lot of these journalists, they're pretty active on Twitter, and if groups or people start putting things out on Twitter, that's one way they pick up on things and kind of get their leads. We had an event go real successful because an intern at WoWo picked up on a Twitter post about a Common Core event, and she ran with it and actually got an interview and so forth. So that's why there was such a good turnout there, and it was just a happenstance thing. So tracking individuals, tracking organizations on Facebook and Twitter, just basically trying to keep a thumb on what's going on out in the media and what's the public perception, what's being bantered about, and then also maybe even direct some Facebook and Twitter campaigns to kind of counter some of those lies and things like that. And then, of course, having a counter propaganda expert would be great, somebody who knows media or can write well. You coordinate with the watchdogs and the writers, goes after the corrupt media reporting. And maybe these positions, some of these responsibilities could be rolled into one person, but I just kind of broke them down as I saw them. Coordinates with counter-propaganda, Facebook and Twitter campaigns, organizes media boycotts or attacks or whatever you'd want to do to point out some hypocrisy or some just flat-out lying. So I don't know if that'd be a person designated to do that or just a function of a couple of people who are informed and watching things. But another part of this would be part of your lobbying team, somebody who would direct lobbying of politicians and works with the researchers, gets to know the issue really well, gets the documentation, contacts the politicians, keeps a tab on them, checks in with them periodically and says, hey, did you read this article? Does this sway you any way? I'd like to show you some information that counters what was in the article, something of that nature. And then relays and lets us know that so-and-so down at the State House isn't quite coming our direction and we need to make some phone calls or something. So they can kind of cue us into that kind of stuff. And then bring in experts as well if need be. These folks would call up a subject matter expert if they didn't know enough themselves, or we didn't have enough, if it was one of these things that was really just way over our head. So we could bring in some experts and it would probably put some weight behind our argument as well if we brought in some experts. So now we'll get on to the NICC service team, again, which is kind of a centralized facilitation of communication and activities and so forth. So here's the responsibilities of the NICC service team, or just kind of an outline of it, overview. But the NICC service team would report to and executes the directives of the NICC group leader. So that would be all of us. That we would say, here's the direction we want to go on this. Now you go make it happen, and the service team would do that. They would organize and moderate our leadership meetings, basically kind of the ones that collect the agenda items and, okay, here's the next issue for discussion, let's have discussion, and now we need to make a decision and so forth, just keeping things moving forward at our meetings. Intergroup communications, this would be to avoid overload of information, because if we start collecting all the information that we could and try and send it out to everybody, sending out some of these emails that we get from some of the gun rights groups and stuff like that out there, they send out these emails and they're really long and I never read them. So my thought is, send them something like, if you get Joe Miller's emails, he'll send you an email and it will have a list of headlines. And if you want, you can click on it and then read the details. But for the most part, all they need is a short blurb. And as long as we can establish trust with people, it'll say, call them now, tell them this, and they'll pretty much, I think they'll pretty much do it. But when you get into all these details and you're constantly sending out all this information, a lot of time it just gets deleted and glazed over. So the idea here would be that the communications folks would take what information is coming on, say, Common Core, and if it's really too much, get back to them and say, hey, we need to condense this down a bit, or we need to put a short blurb in and a link to the page where they can read the details if they really want to. But keep it short. Here's what's going on. Here's what you need to do. Make a phone call. So that's the whole idea of the intergroup communications. Now then, the service team would also handle and coordinate large-scale publicizing, organize larger state-level rallies and events and things of that nature, and any volunteer efforts that we would need that would be, multiple group, larger regional type things. Obviously, if there was any funding or anything that needed to be managed, the NICC service team would take care of that, and if we had to, it would also eventually have a treasurer, but they would manage the expenses and make sure things are getting paid for and that money's getting collected and so forth. They would administer technology needs. This would be a part of it if there were any. Right now we don't really have any right now, but if for some reason the idea of a NICC website came up, that would be something that would be handled by the service team. Coordinating NICC assistance to groups. So in other words, if a group needs some help, we would rally everybody together and go do whatever needs to be done. They would also handle the service team, I imagine, would probably meet online once a week, depending on the level of activity, which I think would be pretty high. But I think they would probably have weekly online meetings. And these people could be scattered, and that's, geographic location I don't think is relevant just because of technology these days. And then possibly have a monthly in-person meeting, and that's just the NICC service team. So that covers their responsibilities. Now it looks like there would be 10 different areas of responsibility, so I think we'd need 10 different people to volunteer for this out of all of our groups. There would be the service team leader, who would basically, here again, be an organizer, hold people accountable, keep track of the tasks, the deadlines, updates, solve problems as they come up, figure out what to do when we hit obstacles and so forth. This person would kind of work with the group and coordinate the creation and maintenance and maintaining of our systems that we put in place. And this basically keeps the machine moving, keeps it going. This person would kind of be the moderator of the NICC leadership meetings that we'd have monthly and quarterly via online or in person when we meet quarterly, and collect those agenda items, put the agenda together, make sure we get through it, and keep us on task, basically, because it's obvious we can We've been doing a pretty good job, but it's also easy to get off on tangents. Coordinate. This person would also probably coordinate, or at least the service team would coordinate with other large organizations and coalitions. So, for instance, like Freedom Works or Americans for Prosperity, if we wanted to try to do something larger. Probably this person or a couple people would be working with the super PAC that was presented to us the last time and keeping tabs on that and what's going on there. And then we have a communications coordinator, which I've touched on a bit. This is all the information that would come from, say, a group on working on a specific issue, Common Core, and then relay that information out to the rest of the groups. This person would maintain that email list, and we'd keep it with somebody else, keep an up-to-date copy with somebody else. Although that list probably won't change too much, just because it's namely been the group leaders. And yeah, like I said, collects information and compiles information from the team coordinators, from the issues teams. Okay, so we would have publicizing here again, but this would be on a much larger scale. This would be something for state fairs or Colts games and Pacer games. Passing out postcards is something that's real easy to do, and if you stand outside the stadium, you know, an hour before the game starts, or maybe after it ends, if it's not too late, you can stand out there and hit thousands and thousands of people. Concerts, expos, again, trade shows, that kind of thing. It'd be obviously the service team would do larger regional type of things. Probably not local gun shows. That's something that an individual group could do. Although we could coordinate to follow a vendor around the state and hit all of his trade shows. If he's got gun shows going on in multiple cities, which they all do. So that would be something that they might organize. Events and rallies. So this would be a person who would actually organize those events, set up they would organize our NICC meetings, our leadership team meetings, our go-to meetings that we have online, plus our in-person quarterly meetings, locate the venue, food, equipment, scheduling, and so forth. They would coordinate all that. Then organizing rallies that are kind of statewide issues, maybe northern regional issues, whatever it might be. People to support local groups. Okay, the idea here is that if a group is fighting a wind farm issue in their local area, and there's a council meeting going on, and they need people to just show up and make it look like a big crowd of opposition, then we could send out an email, and people could, run up to DeKalb County and attend the county council meeting and stand there and say, hey, I don't like, rah, 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 and get a lot of people to show up in opposition. Or maybe hand out flyers if it's really a critical issue or big, something of that nature. So it'd be to kind of mobilize people, kind of like the unions have been doing. They've been bussing people in from out of state. But we would, obviously do caravans and so forth. But so setting up caravans, buses if we needed them, permits for rallies, security for events, and so forth. So that would be the events and rallies coordinator. And then, of course, organizing petitions, coordinated with our volunteers team, which I think is on the next on the list. Yeah, so we have a volunteers coordinator. This person would recruit everybody and kind of, here are the things that need to be done, and we're going to have these 5 people doing this task, and we're going to have these 10 people doing this task, and so forth. Get those workers, know where everybody is, who's supposed to be there, what they need, and who's coming, what they're doing. So the events and volunteers person would probably end up working together quite a bit, or maybe if one person could handle it, they'd do both. And then, of course, the idea is to have somebody who gets familiar with people and skill sets and so forth. So technology, that would be if we had a website or whatever we came up with later on. Facebook and Twitter, I think, might fall under this if we decided to kind of utilize those resources and start kind of combating some of the lies out there. The secretary, we would need somebody to take minutes at our meetings. They would take minutes at the NICC leadership meetings and at our service team meetings. The service team would then have minutes that would be, I don't know, sent out probably by email, posted on a website if NICC decides to create one. The election team, this is one that I thought was pretty important. This would be kind of a seasonal thing too, obviously with the election cycles. But they would cover, the NICC elections team would cover the following offices. It'd be state administration offices and appointments, all federal offices and appointments, state and federal legislative speakers and presidents, so the speaker, minority leaders and majority leaders and the whips and that kind of stuff, following who those people are and letting us know who we need to support and who we would want in those positions. Obviously, we'd like to Deep Six John Boehner and everybody else in these positions at the federal level right now, but also taking a look at our state level. State House and so forth. Judicial appointments is another key one. That's another problem that we have to deal with. So the elections team would be gathering all this information on who these people are and their positions and so forth, and then making recommendations and activism and making campaign opportunities available to us. A NICC debate would be awesome. Since we do have such a large gathering of us now, we could probably get a NICC debate going on with some state reps maybe, or maybe governor or something like that, between governors, treasurers who are competing for the office. The election teams would vet these candidates, create voter guides, pass them out, send them out, voter guide information. I know some of our groups, we also put together voter guides for county council and our local offices, but we could get the information on the state offices from this team and then incorporate that into your local voter guide as well, so you've got a comprehensive one. And the election teams will track politicians track their ratings by specific organizations. In other words, NRA or AFP or FreedomWorks. They get a 78% rating on freedom or rating on gun rights and so forth. The elections team would also present campaign activities or opportunities to all of us to get engaged and involved in supporting a specific candidate. And then this team would also basically work with the efforts underway now to search out and find candidates to challenge incumbents, which we've talked about doing this primary with some of the Republicans who voted against 1427. Now the team would also have a group rally coordinator. Kind of this person would also support, create support for a single group, kind of like we talked about before, where this person might just mobilize people to appear at a local council meeting or something of that nature. I already kind of talked about that. Resolutions team, this was something that came up at the last meeting that we had in August. And a lot of people like the idea, so we'd have a couple people research an issue and then have a writer to draft a resolution and put it together, and then they would take care of getting that circulated, getting it modified and changed and approved for actual official publication from NICC. And then of course a treasury if that were necessary, or a treasurer would be a part of the NICC service team. Now the folks that we would want doing this would be people that would volunteer from our individual Patriot groups. It could be our leaders, some of the leaders that are already involved and so forth. So really anybody who wants to do it, preferably with recommendations from us. We would want, uh, I would want you to recommend somebody if you think they're good for this responsibility or what it would be. You would want me to recommend from our group. From Fort Wayne 912, if somebody, well, I'll do it, so and so wants to do the uh, the volunteer coordinator part, would this be a good person for that? We want to know that they're going to be doers. We don't need complainers. We get plenty of people that can sit around and complain about the government, but we want people that are going to, get engaged and get things moving forward. The people would be appointed to the service team positions, and they would be approved by the group leadership, by the group leaders annually. That would be done on an annual basis. That's one idea that I had about this. I would suggest rotating on a quarterly or a biannual cycle. So kind of like Congress or the U.S. Senate, they're 6-year terms, but a third of the House flips every 2 years. So something of that nature, so that not everybody, we're not getting a whole new service team at the same time who just need to start working together. A whole bunch of strangers. So you've got some people that are being rotated in and out of these responsibilities. I would suggest that once we initially create all this, we wait at least 6 months, maybe 12 months to start the initial rotation. So here's a question that maybe we need to put some thought to and make a decision on is do we want to do this quarterly, biannually on a cycle, or do it what kind of rotation do we want, and then how soon do we want to start the rotating? So basically somebody could be in a position for a year and a half before they're up for a reappointment or something of that nature. As far as funding goes, that's obviously something you always have to consider if you're going to do anything, because it's probably going to involve some money at some point, possibly. Basically, monthly commitments. If there was anything like a subscription or membership, or if for instance, NICC decided they wanted to start having its own webinar. Right now we're going to be using the Freedom Makers account to do this, but if we really demand a lot of it, we might have to get our own. And we could, the nice thing would be if NICC had one, then all the group teams could use it. That's kind of something we'd have to work on a case-by-case basis. But obviously, if we wanted to commit to, I think it's a $50 monthly fee to use that software, that application. We would just propose it, and it's going to be $50, and every group would vote on whether we would do it or not. Funding will be on a case-by-case basis with activities. Basically, the idea here would be we take the proposed activities. We could do this a couple different ways. Take the proposed activity, look at it. Here's what we think it'll cost. It's going to be $700. Everybody approves it, and then the individual groups will share the cost equally. So if there's 7 of us and it's a $700 event, then it's $100 a pop. The other thing we could do is we could say, well, let's do something. Let's hold a rally. Let's do some publications. Let's go ahead and we'll allocate $1,100 for printed materials and do it that way. That way, once the $1,100 is gone, we're done, or we have to reallocate more money and talk about it again. So that would give the NICC service team the funds and the go-ahead to produce whatever materials or pay for whatever it is, and they've got a budget, a set amount that they're restricted to utilize. Now, some of the questions that came up as I was going through this, and there will be more, I'm sure, but just some of the things that we need to think about as an organization is, and I think some of these we may already know, but I wanted to put them out there anyway, just to kind of have people mull it over and think about it. Do we want NICC to be a behind-the-scenes service provider that just keeps us all working and connected together? or do we want it to be more of a public force with some weight behind it? So is it more of we just have Nick and it kind of helps us out in the things that we're trying to do together, so that all of our members call the same politician and give them a hard time about something? Or do we want that to happen on one, for one, and two, Nick is doing something against this politician, or really gave this or the Nick lobbyist showed up, or something of that nature. So it'd be more of a public entity. Um, I guess a couple things I had thoughts on there just myself were that, that would, being Nick, would allow us to connect with other organizations, larger organizations. We could also bring in other groups, and that's another question. Do we want to limit the types of groups that we would bring in to, basically 912, Tea Party, whatever, or we would want to consider bringing in like single issue groups like Right to Life, bringing in churches maybe. I don't know how that would work, but there's Rotary clubs, there's biker groups out there that American Legion and Moose Lodge and things like that. I don't know if we want to even think about that at this point, but just some ideas, since it is a coalition of organizations, of groups. Another thing is, do we want to merge with the Central Indiana Coalition? That's just an idea to always consider. It could be more effective to remain separate, which I think is a good thing. But, here again, it's always, is it larger voice, one voice, statewide, what? You could still coordinate with those groups and remain separate. Would it be more scary for a politician to hear from the Central Indiana people, and then to hear from Nick, and then to hear from the Southern Indiana people? They're giving me a hard time, and would it be more overwhelming, or would it just be one group statewide that's complaining? That something else to consider. So it would, and it probably wouldn't be hard. My last point there, it probably wouldn't be very difficult to coordinate efforts together if something really big came up and something we all really got behind, which we're going to here, I'm sure, with Common Core coming up. So I don't think that'd be too difficult to work together. I'm not really seeing a need to merge with other groups, but just an idea, something to be open-minded, and always keep a possibility out there. Do we want to establish a minimum membership for groups to join, or just take things on a case-by-case basis? So if another group comes in and says, hey, we want to do this, we'd like to be a part of it, do we want to say, well, who are you? What are you about? One thing I thought of here was preventing a minority from gaining influence. Early on in the conservative movement, we saw groups just pop up all over the place, and some puttered out. Some of them, we had some real big egos get in the way, and it was, the group or the leader was not about the movement. The leader was about the leader. So, the other concern here would be that if you set a minimum membership that they would have to have, two people couldn't just like split off from somewhere and go and say, hey, we're a new Tea Party group, so we want to be part of NICC now. Something of that nature. I don't know. It's just some of that stuff, you unfortunately, you have to think about it. And it may not be an issue at this point. It may not even be something we have to consider. A group could break away if they don't like things. But then again, the point is to kind of stick together and operate as a uniform effort, or a uniform voice. Now, that pretty much wraps up the information on NICC. I do have another slide on the timeline here, but these are some ideas that I had that I also wanted to share with everybody, so I'll just throw them in here. Basically, on the Common Core issue, I would suggest distributing some materials at schools. I don't think you can do it on the property, but I know when I pick up my daughter from school, there's a line around the block of parents in cars that I can walk by and hand them something. So that was an idea that I had, and I'm going to be doing that relatively soon. I would also suggest focusing your our individual groups need to focus on two facets: a good publicizing system to raise public awareness and outreach to increase your growth. Now that's really a big issue for us in Fort Wayne. I know a lot of times some of the smaller communities, your groups actually have more people show up than we do here in Fort Wayne on a consistent basis. So maybe that's a problem that we just have, but still, the public awareness part of issues, that's a big one too. And your group's specific issue, whether it's Agenda 21 or 912, really think about the issues, putting the issues team structure in place and covering all those different aspects: the lobbying, the tracking legislation, the PR, the spin in the media, and all that kind of stuff. Because you're not going to get a fair shake on the conservative side or you're not going to get a conservative fair shake from the liberal media and newspapers and so forth. And keep asking people to volunteer, get involved, let them know what's going on. And the reason that I think growing numbers and getting out there with more people is that it'll increase your resources. You probably get a volunteer out of one of every 15 people who start coming to your meetings or something like that, which would be a big help for all of us. So the implementation timeline, here were some thoughts on getting this going if we were to decide to move forward on this. All the groups, like I said, I would suggest ramping up your outreach activities. Namely because we've got the upcoming primaries, so we could use some help. Common Core deadline is coming up on November 1st for all the evaluations. By the time we get this done, I don't know if we'll hit that, but we will need people to fight the legislative battle to get a bill passed that stops it. The elections team, I think that's another high priority. Candidates that don't have a lot of money are going to need our help. Are going to need help on the with boots on the ground and a real grassroots campaign, and probably be needing volunteers to get things organized, holding coffees and stuff like that. So the other thing would be, if we decide to move forward on Sunday, present this to your leadership immediately. Discuss it at your next leadership meeting. Maybe have them just watch this video themselves. I mean, I'm sorry it's so boring and dry, but this is not exciting stuff. Plus, I've had a sinus infection for about a week now, so you have to pardon my singing voice. But anyway, identify any volunteers in your group that you think might want to be part of the NICC service group. Get some people to start assuming these responsibilities for your issues team. That would probably relieve some people's, relieve some weight on some folks' shoulders, and get some people involved in following the issues and really making a difference. I think this would really make a difference. Send in your list of volunteers a week before the October meeting. I'm guessing probably send that to me, but we'll have somebody to send that into so that we have a list that we can go over. And basically, I'd like to have the list of volunteers who want to do things and get those people just basically approved. If we decide to go forward, I'd like to get them approved. I think we need to get them approved in the October meeting. Yeah, and get them approved. So that's the last point there. So that's pretty much the end. Sorry this went so long. Sorry about my voice, but if you have any questions, you can email me, and I will put my email up here in just a second. Okay, so here's my phone number and email address. Go ahead and jot that down. Like I said, if you have any questions or suggestions like this, whatever, feel free to contact me at any time. One other thing I did want to show you, here's a flyer that we've been using. You can pause the video and look at this, so I'll just kind of scroll through it real quick. But these are 8.5 sheets by 11, and it basically is formatted into 4 sections, front and back. So you got page 1 has this on it, and then page 2 has this information, which should be on the back side. So have these printed on, say, cardstock. We've had these printed on cardstock, and it costs about $100 to get 2,000 of these done at Office Depot. So this has worked out real well. If you'd like a copy of this, let me know and I can send it to you. And then you can just take this, delete it, and put your information in, and the formatting is already done. And then just take it over and have it printed. But you can pause the video and take a look at this information in more detail. So anyway, thank you very much for your time. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day.